Hello everyone, this is General Hand Grenade. Welcome to my war room in Prince George, British Columbia. This is the last video from our playtest of Global War 1914 between myself and Robert Hatcher from the United States. We're both helping to design this and playtest this Global War 1914 game. So if you've been following along, you know that yesterday I put out the video showing the end of World War I, but it's not the end of this game because we still have the Russian Civil War to finish. And so, as we look down Russia here from east to west, you see what has happened. We've done 3 turns now, and there's a maximum of 7 turns, but that is going to end prematurely if the white armies are eliminated or the red armies are eliminated. So the red army is the Soviets. That's the what you think of as the Russians, like they're the brown guys, right? And the white army obviously are the white guys, right? So yeah, like the whites were, they were like organized by officers from the old Tsar. Tsar Nicholas was the last Tsar, I guess. And so in the vacuum that was created when the Tsar stepped down, they kind of stepped up and formed a government. And then, of course, there was the revolution afterwards where Lenin and Trotsky and all those guys, I guess Stalin would have been a part of that eventually as well. So they led a revolution against the whites. So the whites would have represented basically old Russia, and the Red Army would have represented where a lot of the people wanted to go. Like if they've been under monarchy rule for, you know, as long as I don't know how long it is, but let's just say it was forever, you know, as far as everybody then were concerned. And they were tired of monarchy rule, and radical ideas, obviously, right? Communism. They wanted to get as far away from monarchy as they could, and that would have been the opposite of it, right? People ruled by themselves, but not necessarily in a democracy, right? Like they didn't want the chance that people could vote for something that oppressed the working people anymore, and so it was really an extreme ideology. But anyway, this was the conflict, and it started during World War I, and it continued on for a few years after World War I ended. Before I get to what's happened here, I just want to show you a couple of things from yesterday's video. I was, if you watched that, you remember that I was looking to see how many dreadnoughts they had, and I didn't realize, but I think during since then, Robert has moved his German Navy into here. So there was one dreadnought. I was wondering, where's that other dreadnought? It's down there in port again. You'll know what I'm talking about when I say again. But anyway, there's that's the dreadnought down there. So that's why the British didn't get that point. And he didn't end up getting the point for West Hungary. No, not West Hungary. Sorry, Western Ukraine, because the Austrians had gotten it. You can't give a victory point to Germany and Austria for the same place. Only one of them could have owned it, right? So there was that. And then there was a couple of questions that we had in the comment section. One of them asked if Japan and China had victory conditions as well. And the answer is yes and no. So China does not have victory conditions. Japan only has victory conditions if they're being played independently. There's the option in this game, like if you had several players, 5 or 6 players, one player wanted to take a smaller role, that player could say, okay, I'll just play Japan. And there's victory conditions for the Japanese. I think there's 5 or 6 of them. I didn't really read the rules that well because we weren't playing with an independent Japan. I just kind of scanned them. So I can't tell you what they are or anything, but basically if Japan was doing well, which it looks like they are, right? I mean, I would imagine they would have needed to take a few more islands in the Pacific. But yeah, an independent Japan could have gotten more, could have gotten some points. So China will not get any points, although Nanking is a victory city. So by Japan taking Nanking, because China was part of the Central Powers at the end of the game, and Japan was part of the Allies, the Nanking rests in the hands of the Allies. That's a victory city. It's actually listed as an American victory city. And there was one other thing. Oh, I guess I might as well tell you, there's no victory points that are given out for Italy. Although, in the transition document, and I was just reading it this morning, so that's the transition from this game, Global War 1914, to Global War 1936 to 1945. There's actually, you can base the starting positions of 1936 on what happened here in 1914, and I'd only scanned it once, so I didn't have much information when I talked about it a bit yesterday, but for Italy, if they're on the winning side, then they get 4 victory points, and that doesn't go towards the score in this game. That just means they have 4 victory points. So whatever victory points you had in the game, you take all or a portion of that, depending on what type of victory it was. You know, if it was a partial victory or if it was a total victory, you would take a certain number of your victory points, and you would spend them in before the 1936 game starts. So, you know, for instance, Germany, they spend a few victory points. I can't remember what the number is, and they would start the game with Austria, right? Just things like that, right? And there's varying degrees of that. Like for I think it's 5 victory points, Britain can start with a battleship on the board, like an extra battleship that they don't have, right? Things like that. Like I don't want to get into that too much because I'm muddying the waters here. I just, you know, I mentioned the transition, and I wanted to mention it again because I had a bit more information, and I don't want to tell you too much about it though, because that's subject to change and a lot of discussion in the meantime. And really what we're concentrating on in this video is the Russian Civil War. So we've already changed a little bit because the Red Army was just getting totally worked. Like the Austrians, the Ottomans, the Germans, the British, the French, and the Americans each get $6 to spend in the Russian Civil War, and then the Russians were only getting like $8-9 because you just count up the value of their territories, right? And so like it was just it was obvious that they were going to lose really quickly in this thing. So, and one of the things was we weren't rolling for the Russian. They have wartime economy, right? But after the war ended, we did not roll for wartime economy. So we decided, you know what? In order to balance this, let's put that back in. If they had wartime economy at the end of the war, then let's just keep going there, because otherwise the imbalance in income from the two sides was just way too great, right? And so that balanced it out. And of course, we went back the 2 turns that we had missed and rolled dice and then threw the units down on the board. So the the Soviets have started to come back a bit. Like some of the cards that were pulled, the very first card that was pulled was that the Ottoman did not get to spend that $6. They did have Transcaucasia, a controlled White Army in Transcaucasia, which meant that they got to do a recruitment roll, but only they had to roll a 1 because they only had the 1 territory, right? So that was one of the cards, and there's been other cards, like I think in the last round there, the Soviets got +1 in their attacks for something to do with their officers. And there's been cards where the whites were getting lots of stuff, and so that did not help the cause of the Soviets and why it was getting quickly unbalanced there. But yeah, like you can see here, for instance, in the Baltic states here, there's 3 white armies that are controlled by the Germans, and the Red Army had attacked Estonia here and brought them down a bit. But Germany is lend-leasing up to these guys, and lend-leasing to the Polish, and the armies, like he's also managed to recruit. Like he's done a good job of recruiting for the Germans. So it's going to be tough for the Soviets to root them out of there. Now, I kind of figured, like I'm the one playing the Soviets here, even though I was, I'm also cheering for the Allies, which are against the Soviets, but I have to do it that way. And in order to play this as for two players, to try to play test it. And so I kind of figured that, okay, in order for me to get my victory points, like a lot of them are in the Ukraine and in Poland, right? And one of the things that I don't want to do is wipe out the White Army too quickly. Like if I was to get rid of them in 3 turns, for instance, and this is the end of the 3rd turn already, if I had been able to get rid of them in that quickly, then I could not have been able to get all those other points that are available to me, right? And so what you want to do is you want to defeat the White Army, but you don't want to do it too quickly. I kind of figured that out right away, right? So it's going to take some getting used to and everything. This is a brand new game, this Civil War thing, and it's going to take some getting used to, and that's one of the things. So another one of the cards that were pulled was that Poland could go to war with the Russians. Now, normally Poland does not go to war with the Soviets. Normally they don't go to war with the Soviets until the Soviets declare war on them or attack them, right? And so that card was pulled, and they did do an attack here, which they did not succeed. So they pulled back. Another card was that Germany placed an infantry down there. Like it could have been any territory in Central or South America, Central South America or Europe, any neutral. So I chose Bolivia down there. And what I had to do is I had to fight the guy that was there. And I ended up winning that. So that's going to be a victory point for the Soviets, because they own a territory that's outside of Russia. And I think there's only one available. And so that's the only one that I needed. What are some of the other cards that were pulled? There was this here. This is the German Freikorps. That's one. There was a couple of Makhno army dudes. Makhno was kind of a rebel. He didn't support either side really, but he supported the Red Army more. So, like he was everybody's enemy, and his army kept growing. Like he'd get deserters from both sides, and they'd join him. And he was down around here in the real world, in southern Ukraine. That's where his army was. And there was a card that was pulled for the Czech Legion. That was a pretty big deal in the Civil War as well. There was, I think it was about 50,000 Czech soldiers that were in Russia, and they stayed until they just couldn't take it anymore. They thought, what are we doing here? Like they were there 2 years after the war, and they were dying for no reason. The whites were just a totally inept army. Like they were not cohesive whatsoever, and they were on the white side, and they said, okay, we want out of here. But of course, like they were somewhere around here at the time, right? In order for them to get home, they would have had to go through the Red Army, and they didn't want to do that. So they made a deal to go this way, take the train, and take a boat from there and all the way back to their home country somehow. But the whites, to show you just how inept and what a bunch of jerks they were, they fooled them. They put them on trains, and they sent them into the arms of the Red Army. And they got some kind of bounty for it, right? I don't know what it was. I can't remember. I've seen the documentary, but anyway, what a bunch of dicks, though. So the Czech Legion, though, they got there was some units that got put on, and there actually there was a lot more white armies over here, but the Soviets have kind of keyed on this area over here. Poland just entered it, so they haven't really had a chance to attack Poland yet. They're really trying to key on the White Army and also taking out the ports, because like over here, for instance, if they were to take this port out, this is the point of entry for the British money. So if they took this port out, then Britain would not be able to send any more Lend-Lease over with that $6 that they get per turn. And so, you know, like that, there's that. And there's the other side, Primorsky Cry, where the American Lend-Lease comes through there. So they're trying to take these points of entry out. Like I did one. I got one point of entry out, and that was down here, right? In Transcaucasia. So the Ottomans are no longer a part of the Civil War. I've managed to eliminate them. But so far that's it, right? If I can eliminate those points of entry, then like I said, I eliminate those outside influences. But you can see though, like I haven't really talked too much about what's happened. Specifically, basically what's going on here is the White Army is trying to spread out because you get to roll dice for as many territories as you had. So like the Americans only started with one territory. And so now they have three territories, three controlled territories with the whites, right? And so now they get to roll the dice at 3 or less for their recruitment roll. Plus they get to do their Lend-Lease. But the thing is, you have to have a unit in that territory to control it, just like you did in the World War I game here. If it was a colony, even if it was your originally controlled colony, if it's outside your home territory, you have to have a unit on it, or you don't collect the money for it. But in this case here, you have to have it in order to put your roundel on it. Like if I was to move this artillery down here, then these things come off. The American controlled and the white roundel. So you have to leave a unit there, and so that makes it a little bit more difficult. Whereas the Soviets don't have to do that, right? Like their territories are already their territories. So they can leave their territories and still collect for them because it's their home country. They're treating the whites as kind of an invading force here, but not really. I mean, they weren't, but that's basically how the mechanics of this game are working. I dearly love to take this out, but I hate that Allied player. That was me, by the way, because on the last turn, I moved a whole bunch of British over here. If it hadn't been for that, then these guys would have been gone by now. I definitely would have taken those guys out by now, but it's difficult. Again, I mentioned this many times during this playtest. It's really difficult to be the attacker in this game. It's a lot easier to defend. And of course, they got 5 artillery there already. So I had more stuff here in Karelia, but I've moved them down here to try to take these guys out. Like try to choke out that German point over there. And then there's also Finland. Now, if I don't touch Finland, then they will stay out of it, right? They're a neutral right now. But I do have the option of attacking Finland as the Red Army. And if I do, then they're going to be controlled by the Germans. So again, they would do the recruitment roll, and they would be able to take to Lend-Lease to them. Like they've only got $6, so they can Lend-Lease to either Finland or the whites or the Poles. But they can only do one, or actually, they can only Lend-Lease $6. So, or 6 IPP. So that they kind of have to make a choice, right? But that gives them another choice though with Finland, right? So, and that is a victory point right there, that Finland, by taking out Finland. And the Ukrainians are not a part of it right now, but they're sure building up though. Like they've got an armored train. These armored trains are pretty cool. And armored trains were actually a pretty big deal in the Russian Civil War because, you know, like the mobility now or then was not what it is now. So, you know, with the Civil War going on all across the largest country in the world, the only real vehicle that they had was a train. I mean, cars had been invented and tanks and stuff, but they didn't go very fast. And of course, the road networks were not that great, you know, back then. So trains were a really, really big part of the Civil War. There's a Ukrainian train on the board right now, and there's a Russian train down here. And trains in this game, the armored trains, they actually get first strike. The whites have a train over here. So both the white and the red army trains have been used to good success here, using their they attack the same as artillery, but without the boosting of the infantry, right? So they attack at 4 and their first strike. And but the difference, the trade-off is that these guys will go 6 spaces, right? Trains could go 6 spaces into combat, whereas the artillery only goes 1 space. And it boosts the infantry or cavalry by 1. Anyway, so that's where we're sitting. I don't want to go on and on here. I just want to kind of show you what's going on. I'd say the Soviets got their work cut out for them. You know, if all they had to do was fight the whites, that would be no problem. But I think that the Ukrainians and the Poles are going to make it much different for them, because they're actually pretty strong right now. Poland can only go 2 spaces outside their territory, so they could only make it to here or here, I guess here. One more thing I could mention. During World War I, Petrograd was the capital of Russia. And then when the revolution starts, then Moscow becomes the capital of the Red Army. And ever since then, Moscow has been the capital of Russia, right, as we know. So, but back then it was Petrograd, and Petrograd became Leningrad after that, of course. And now it's St. Petersburg. They just can't decide on the name there, can they? Anyway, so that's where we are now, and we're going to try to finish this today. So it should be on the rest of this video regardless of when we finish it. And we're back. This is actually the next day or the day after that, I can't remember. But this is actually the second opportunity to make this segment of the video, because as I was uploading the video, I was watching it and I realized that everything that I just said, I'd said 2 days ago. So I thought, well, you know, they don't need to hear all that crap twice. My videos are long enough, right? Anyway, let's get on with it. So, as I said, we had to change things because the Red Army, it wasn't very balanced, right? And I don't think that you could have balanced it that way. It's just that the disparity in money, it was just too great, right? So aside from that, we also changed the number of cards that get pulled. Before we were pulling 2 cards, and for the rest of the playtest we were pulling 3 cards. And so we did that because the disparity still existed, right? They were still getting more money. And we really wanted to give both sides an opportunity to win this Civil War. And plus, you know, like we had way more cards than what we needed to play this expansion. And so we thought, why not pull 3 cards a turn? Because all of those events that are on those cards really did happen. And so why not try to get most of them in there? And it's not that every game's going to be the same, because you're pulling them in a different order, right? And it's not like the rest of the game where you pulled the cards were based on the time frame. Like spring of 1915, there was a certain set of cards, and then summer of 1916 there was a certain set of cards, right? Whereas this one, it's just all Russian Civil War cards. And so we thought, yeah, let's do that. There's still extra cards after that even. And it allows you to add more elements into this, because this was very chaotic, this event, this Russian Civil War. Here, let's move the camera around so you're not staring at one thing too long. So the Russian Civil War was, the best word to describe it was chaos. Absolute chaos. It's really hard to capture that in a game this size. Like this is a game within a game. If you played Global War 36 before, you know how complex that game is, and this game is just as complex as that. In some ways, not as much because there's fewer units, but in some ways it's more complex because the political situation was a little more tricky back in that era, right? And so it would be almost impossible to capture really all the chaos that happened in the Russian Civil War. We've done our best to do that by using cards. If you weren't using cards, it would just be this color of plastic versus that color of plastic, right? It would be pretty darn simple, and that would not capture it. So it's pretty good in that we were able to capture it a little bit better by introducing the elements. So, you know, we could put the Czech Legion in it, and we could put the Freikorps in it, like this. That's this guy here. I managed to kill him on the last turn, which was good. But just to take this guy for an example, this Freikorps here, I mean, these were Germans, right? They had no business being there. And this is, they basically went up to here, into Latvia here. Now, they were not fighting for anything in particular. They weren't fighting for land. They weren't fighting for ideology. They weren't fighting for religion. They weren't, they didn't care about communism. They didn't care about the monarchy. They didn't care about anything. They were basically, I mean, if you were to describe them in a word, they were assholes. That's what they were. They just they were fighting because they wanted to fight. Like they wanted to assert their dominance over somebody, right? Like we've met people like that before. We all have, right? And that's basically what these guys were. And it was from this Freikorps that element persisted long after the First World War, and that was the beginnings, the origin of the SS. So that kind of tells you who these people were. But how do you put that into the game, right? Without a card, how do you really capture that? Because they didn't fight for one side or the other. They just went there and started fighting people, right? Anyway, the way we've done it in this game is we've made them so that they were a part of the whites, that side, like they were against the communists, because we had to pick one or the other. But I mean, really, in actual fact, they made it up to Latvia here. And then when they decided to withdraw, they had to go through Lithuania, and they just cut a swath of destruction. Like, these people were just disgusting, right? Some of the worst atrocities ever committed in war, they committed, because they had no conscience, right? They weren't fighting for anything. They weren't fighting for anyone, right? They were just fighting. And so anyway, having to capture elements like that, and elements like one of the things that we don't have in here, because it makes it way too complicated, is the Ukraine and the Poles actually fought for a brief period of time, not for very long. So how do you capture that, right? And then I've mentioned the Czech Legion before. How do you capture that without a card? And so if you were to make that into its own separate game, like on its own board and everything, it's just a map of Russia, and like a little bit of borders around, like the sea zones around, and maybe the territories just around that, so that you have points of entry for the other elements that entered Russia for the Civil War. Then you could do that. But to add that level of complexity into a game, and add it into a game as just a part of a game that has that much complexity, like, good luck finding somebody to play that game, right? That's just too much. Like, your rule book could go on for 200 pages, right? But yeah, it would be a great game when you really start looking at it and finding out all the different things that happened in the Russian Civil War and the preceding revolution before that. The revolution is would have happened to begin the Civil War. Like, that would have been during the First World War. So anyway, we managed to balance it, or we think so anyway. Like you got to keep playing it, right? You got to keep trying it. But that's going to be easy, because we'll just reset back to the starting point where we started this from, and replay it again and replay it again. Like, you can do this in about once you get good at it, I think you could play this Civil War in between an hour and 2 hours, I think. If the people that were playing were playing, they weren't out having a cigarette or doing something else, or slow players, right? We've all met them before too, but you could play it pretty quickly. And so that's something that we can do over and over and over again, in between games or whatever. Like, certainly before this game is released to the public, we will have tested this Civil War a bunch of times. Now, the starting point for it, of course, would be different in other cases. Like, there isn't a certain date set where the Russians collapse. They collapse when they collapse, right? And depending on how well they're doing or how poorly they're doing, that's adds to the likelihood or the less likelihood that it will happen. Because World War I was just part of the catalyst for it, right? For the revolution. And so again, that's just a part of the reason that you would that the Russians would collapse in this game. Mostly what it is dice rolls, right? Like depending on how many territories Russia's taken or how many they've lost, then you add or subtract to the dice rolls. And in this game that we just played here, it actually happened on the second roll, so it happened a little quicker than it probably should have, right? And that did contribute to how this game ended. When I mean game, I mean World War One. The biggest factor, of course, was the British losing their navy early in the game. That allowed the Germans to entrench themselves in France. But having the Russians collapse so soon meant that the Austrians and the Germans could just leave this front and throw everything they had at the Western front, right? And so, there's that complexity as well. But yeah, this was a fun expansion. I tell you, it's way better than that Axis and Allies 1914, where, you just, okay, well, there's this much IPCs left. And so Russia collapses and you take all their units off the board and that's it, right? How anticlimactic is that? Who wants to play the Russians and go home early, right? Anyway, this is a lot more interesting and I actually enjoyed it. It moved along really fast, and so it's a fast moving game. And if you just had a couple of hours, then you could probably set this up without setting up the World War One game if you wanted to. Just to play it out, it's of course it's better as part of the World War One game, absolutely, for sure. And again, like I said, the starting points are different. So let's take a look at the whites actually since that last section of video, the whites actually increased a bit before they started to decrease. Like the whites had gone. You remember there was a bunch of British up here. I don't know if I'm in here. So there was a bunch of British and whites up here, and there was a bunch of Red Army here. So the Red Army kind of moved itself over so that they could go after the Baltic states here, which opened the door for the White Army to come down here, and they actually made it down to here. And if there was blitzing, they could have blitzed into Moscow, but of course there's no blitzing in this game, right? And then the Red Army came back and they took them back, and then the British Army decided to withdraw. And so when they withdrew from here, then that made it easy for the Red Army to come in here and take this port out. The Germans never did withdraw. They were the only major power that didn't withdraw from the Civil War in this game. And so they were still, they still had some White Army here, right? And they were still adding to Poland. Now, in the last section of video, the Poles had just gained the ability to attack, and they attacked out here in full force, right? And it took a bit. I was actually lucky because Poland was really strong at the time. And when they attacked, it was easier for me to defend than attack, right? So I was able to whittle them down. They lost more units than I did as the Red Army, and so that made them easier to attack. And they did attack, and then they attacked over here on the last turn, which was surrounding, and then they also attacked Warsaw. So attacking this one first meant that the city was surrounded, and this guy held out. Miraculously, he held out. Otherwise, that would have been 2 points for the Red Army. Finland would have also been 2 points, but you've only got so much resources and you've only got a limited amount of time. And this game actually did go an extra turn because there was a card that we pulled near the end. I think with 2 turns left, we pulled a card that said extend the Civil War by 1 turn. So otherwise, I don't think the Red Army would have, they definitely wouldn't have gotten this far because they kept pushing, right? Now, one thing that didn't happen was the Ukrainians getting into it. There was no card in the game that allowed for the Ukrainians to get in. And when you look at it, Ukraine has 5 territories in here. You don't count the Crimea, that's a French-controlled territory. But the other Ukrainian territory, there's 5 of them. And so a recruitment roll, you get a dice at 5 or less, right? And so that's a pretty good chance. And he did recruit a number of units. Like this turn here, he was able to put an artillery on that he bought, and he was able to recruit an infantry. So that happened quite often, right? And then you can see there's just tons of units in here. Like, I think that if you're going to root the Ukrainians out of there, then you're going to have to jump on them early because of that fact, because they have all those that stuff and everything. But the way we played this game, we didn't balance it until halfway through, so I didn't really have that opportunity. Like, the Reds were not very strong. They had their hands full just fighting the Whites, right? And when Poland entered it, I thought, well, this is going to be over in a couple of minutes, right? But then we kind of changed that a bit. We changed the parameters of how we were doing it by drawing more cards and stuff. And a lot of the cards favor the Red Army in this, and so that they were able to come back. But again, they were never able to take out the Balkans here. Almost got Poland for the 2 points, but didn't, and then didn't get any points. That would have been worth 2 points as well. Everybody had withdrawn except for Germany and France. The Americans withdrew, the British withdrew, the Ottomans withdrew. Although the British, on the last set of cards we pulled, they actually put these units down here. Just a card, and it was a historical event. The British had made some gains in there. They probably, obviously, attacked from India, right? Anyway, or Persia even, I'm not sure. But anyway, that's how far they made it in the game. Had those have been White Army, then I would have had to deal with that. But because it was late in the game, I didn't even bother, because the British can't move out from there. They're just, for lack of better terms, say they're speed bumps, right? You know, they would have been a big help in recruitment roles if I could have got some White Armies down there, but that didn't happen, right? It was a card that was pulled late. If that card was pulled early, then that would have been a different story as well. Now over here in the east, the Whites, you seen in the last section of video there, the Whites were pretty strong. They actually got a little bit stronger, and then the tide turned. I threw a lot of my resources over here. I wanted to get the Americans out. So there was American, British, and Japanese over there, and they all withdrew. Well, yeah, they all withdrew. So that left just the Whites on their own, right? And I wasn't able to get to Primorsky Krai though. I stumbled in winter on the winter turn, which was not the last turn. I think it was the second to last turn or the third to last turn, because you could only attack for one round. And so I didn't take any territory on that one. I think that was when I was going for a Mur and I didn't get a Mur. So then I had to get a Mur the next turn, and that meant I couldn't get to Primorsky Krai after that. But anyway, that was a goal of mine. And being the first time I played the game, I didn't really know what I should do or what I shouldn't do. I was just trying to, basically play, right? And trying to make it balanced and everything. If I had to play over again, and I really cared about the points, then I might have taken Finland, right? Because Finland is not very strong. And so I could have overwhelmed them. Germany, sure, they could have lent-leased to them. But if I had to come in here and force and then attack this one, then it would have been over in 2 turns with Finland, right? So that, I could have done that. And again, like with Ukraine, if I would have attacked them early. But again, the way we played this game, I wasn't able to do that because the Red Army was just not very strong early in the game. And so with them having the Ukraine and the Poles and the Finns and the White Army, and then of course the major powers also had units in there, although they weren't attacking, but they had those units in there that helped defend for the White Army, right? Anyway, I found it pretty fun though. Like I said, it actually moved pretty fast and everything, and it was really interesting. It was interesting in learning about it. I watched at least 10-12 hours of documentaries while we were playing the World War I game in anticipation of the Civil War, because I really didn't know much about it. I mean, I knew there was a guy named Lenin, there was this, there was that, and you hear this and you hear that, but I found out a lot more about it, and it was really quite interesting. And so I was looking forward to playing it. and it didn't disappoint. It's a small game within a larger game. Like, I'm not saying it was a great game. It was just, it was a really interesting element of the game that we played, the World War I game that we played. It was a cool way to finish it off. Again, though, we highly recommend that you have at least 3 players if you're going to play the Russian Civil War expansion, because like I had to play 2 sides on this one. I had to tell myself, I'm the Red Army now. I want to win as the Red Army and play it that way. Okay, now I'm the Allies. Now I want to beat the crap out of the Red Army. And it's kind of difficult to do that. And when you're playtesting, you've got a reason to. So, I had all the motivation in the world to accomplish that. But if I was just playing against my friend Bob and I wanted to beat him, then, maybe I'm going to purposely tank as one side or the other, So definitely, you want to have 3 players or more in order to play the Russian Civil War. I tell you can make a great game out of this if you had 6 or 7 people, right? Because you're throwing this Civil War in, you play an independent Japan. That that would have been interesting, right? And then at the end, you've got your victory points, right? Like Japan would have gotten their own victory points, and they could have spent those in the 1936, prior to the 1936 game beginning. Any points that they might have gathered, right? They might have gotten this island, or an extra unit, or something like that, right? The most extreme thing that is in that is China. Like the game starts with Germany aligning China, and you can imagine how that would swing that game, right? But that is an extreme case. Like it costs 10 points for them to do that, for the Germans to do that. So they would have had to have gotten all of their points and win the game in a total victory, and take at least Paris, maybe even more victory cities than that, and then that they would have had enough points to do that. But I mean, that's just one of their options. With that many points, I mean, they could have gone and did 2 or 3 or 4 different things, smaller things, get themselves some more units and take Austria and Bulgaria or whatever, So, but I don't imagine that happening very often, where one side or the other is going to get that many victory points to spend in the 36, and I wouldn't be in favor of that if it were, because I don't necessarily want to play a game of 36 if I'm going to start with one arm time behind my back, right? It's one thing to slightly change it because history was a little different before you got there, but to change that game, that is a beautiful game to begin with, would be difficult. So anyway, I think that's about all I got for you here today. I could go on and on and on and on, as I quite often do, but I think I've given you all the information you really need, except to tell you that we are going to do this again for sure. We're going to have another play test, and we might even have a couple more play tests this winter, but for sure we're going to have one more play test. And if Bob wants to, then we'll do what we just did here, where we make videos of it, and that would be cool too. Whether we do or don't, I don't know, but I'm looking forward to the next game, because we've changed this game a lot since we started it, and it's kind of difficult to change it in the middle, and then we'll put this back, but I really would have done something differently, right? Like in the Civil War here, I probably would have attacked Ukraine a lot quicker than, I didn't attack them at all, but I probably would have attacked them a lot quicker. So just things like that. And that's just one thing. I mean, there's a lot of different things that would have happened differently. Japan would have had a better fight against China over here, so I'm looking forward to the next time we play, and starting with a set of rules that are more refined. And I could see you tweaking it a little bit more here and there. This game went the way it went, sure, but it could have went differently, right? If the biggest event in this game was a huge mistake that I had made. I left my navy out of port here. I wanted him to come and attack me, and he did, and he rolled better than me. Canceling my navy, he doesn't really need a navy. Of course, it's a big help to the Germans, but he doesn't actually need it. He doesn't need transport himself anywhere. Whereas I need to transport over to France. So Britain was not able to get any troops into France until late in the game, after the after the Germans were already entrenched, and that was the big difference in this game, for sure. Everywhere else, I think the game went about the way that you might expect, although definitely some surprises, right? Especially in Asia, and the Mexicans over there, they were quite the going concern for the Americans. But really, really fun game to play, and I'm, like I said, really looking forward to the next one when we've got the rules more refined than they were at the start of this game. But anyway, thank you for joining me and my friend Bob. So I'm going to leave you here. So take care, everyone. General Hand Grenade and Colonel Bob out.